Matt Maruca. Welcome to the Thought Room.
Thank you for having me. I feel very welcome. It's nice here.
Oh, I'm so glad. I feel like we've been trying to make this happen for a while. So I'm feeling very blessed for your presence today.
I'm glad it worked.
And the schedule's aligning. The last time I saw you was where?
In Cancun. Well, yeah, close to Cancun.
Yeah. And where were we?
Joe Dispenza event.
Yeah. What's so interesting about seeing you there was there were how many people? Maybe 1,700 or something like that. And so there were absolutely probably people that both you and I knew there that we never saw because it was such like a large group of people. At least that's how it was for me. I found out a bunch of people were there after that I never even ran into. But the one person who had first told me about the profound impact of their Joe Dispenza experience was you. And I think we were in Austin maybe like a year before. We were out to dinner with Matt McCoy, who's also been a guest on this show. And you were talking about your Joe Dispenza experience. And I kind of completely forgot about it until I was at the conference. And I was like, oh yeah, Matt told me about this. And then I was looking around the crowd and I was like, I think that's him, like 3 sections away. I thought that I saw you. And so I sent you a text. I was like, hey, I'm at Joe Dispenza, like thought of you. And then you were like, yeah, I'm here.
Nice.
Yeah. So synchronicities abound and very grateful. That's actually a cool place to start with, what's been opening up for you since that experience, if anything. What did you integrate and take away from that?
Yeah, so I had been to one event in the beginning of January before seeing you and our friend Max in January of 2021. That was my first event. 6 months before, I had done his online intensive and progressive course because I was really interested and I really wanted to take like a deep dive into his work. And then that occurred because I had been searching for years for some, let's say, something. I didn't know what, but that was my journey was since I was a kid, searching for something, trying to find through, I had health challenges, so I tried Western medicine to feel better, and then I tried naturopathy, and then I tried a bunch of food diets, and then I learned and I went really strict and worked partially, but not all the way. Then I tried a bunch of light stuff, which actually worked a lot more. And I started a company based on it, making light therapy eyewear with raw optics. And then from there, I ended up again, I was better, but I was stressed a lot and I was really struggling. And so after some years, and as the COVID thing was kind of in full swing, I was like, I need to do something because I was working like all day, like 12 hours a day, and just stressed and not feeling good. And I was like, I remember this guy, Dr. Joe, like I had read Ram Dass, Be Here Now, and I had been super open to energy and spirituality because of the things I learned about light. And from a scientific perspective, it made a lot of sense that we're these energetic beings. So anyway, I was like, this guy, Dr. Joe, is someone I could invest my energy into. I didn't want to just sign up for any, mindset thing or coach or, any just particular thing because I didn't trust that if I put a lot of time and energy in, I wanted it to be on something that was like the truth, not something that was like 50% of the way there because I had already done it with a few other things that way. And so I was so sold when I listened to the intensive and progressive course. I was like, this guy's got it. Like he has some formula and it works, even though some part of me doubted it and didn't commit to the meditations fully, etc. I was like, I know he's right. I felt he was right. One of my friends recently said like there was like a truth bell and it was just going off in my heart. Like the truth bell was like ding, 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 ding. So anyway, when I saw that the events were live, I didn't even know he did events, but that apparently was a big thing even years going into COVID. He was traveling like 10 months of the year going into COVID. And then they got like shut down as they were going into a huge full swing. And they had to stop and pause and reevaluate, which is probably for the better for everyone in some way. And then yeah, the new events came out. And apparently, so the first one that came out, I signed up for, it was in January, and it was so quickly booked that they had to open up an event in October and November, I believe, or no, November and December before that one. And so I was like, how did people who signed up after me go to an event before me? I didn't get that, but that's how. Anyway, it was amazing. And I went back in the end of February, so 2 months later, again in the middle of June, 3 months later, again in October, 3 months later.
Wow.
And then in the beginning of February.
You're a Dr. Joe junkie.
Yeah, for sure. And so the 5th event was the February with you. So It's been quite a lot. And I'm going again in June. So the context I give, I think obviously so that people can understand that I'm really interested in what he's teaching and why. And the takeaways for me have been nothing short of like everything I ever really wanted. So I thought I wanted to have like health and wellness. So I pursued health and wellness for so long, but I didn't realize that I didn't really have a real like why, like a reason, as much as that can sound like a cliche. There was no like real purpose. I was just like, I want to be healthy because some part of me thought like, then I'll be able to enjoy my life and be happy. Instead of just identifying like right away, I just want to be happy. And that's actually just what I want. And just as he might say, surrendering to like how it happens, like just, and as I've gotten more into it and studied other great spiritual masters, because Dr. Joe for me was like a huge opening to like, wow, this is the path I want to pursue. But I also identified that there are many other great masters to learn from, and many of whom are carrying lineages and traditions from thousands of years ago. So I thought, why not investigate them? And I was directed to Yogananda, this great master from India, and started reading his books and lectures and teachings.
Autobiography of a Yogi, classic.
Exactly.
I actually am an initiate into Kriya Yoga. I don't know if you know that.
You are? I didn't know that. That's amazing.
I'm a big, Yogananda's been a huge part of my path. So
congratulations. Cool. Did you do that through SRF? Or?
No, there are a couple different lineages within, but I got initiated in New York City when I was living there through the Kriya Yoga International.
Oh my gosh, you're amazing. So Pragyanananda is the living master. Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Yes.
No wonder
I've met him. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
In Texas. Yeah.
So I met that's really amazing. That's really interesting. I have a friend who I met surfing in Bali 3 years ago who is like a direct disciple as well of Pragyanananda. Yeah. And he directed me. He was the first person to tell me about Joe Dispenza, but I forgot, kind of like how you forgot I mentioned the event. Like I didn't realize until I was like, who first? Oh my gosh, it was him. And he also directed me to the Autobiography of a Yogi, but I didn't read it right away. But I had already spent a lot of time in Encinitas because a friend of mine was like, dude, come here, I'll teach you how to surf. When I was in LA, he's like, come down, visit me in Encinitas. And I just loved it. I just always drove past the SRF temple and I was like, this place is so cool, but I never knew what it was. Yeah. So finally, like once I got into Dispenza and I looked back to Yogananda, read his book, I was like, whoa, like this is so weird. This dude I met surfing, like, you know, not for no reason for sure, like led me to Dispenza so that I could ultimately come to Yogananda and come to this lineage. And so, yeah, I also plan to do an initiation, but,
there's a big synchronicity here I'm going to jump in with, which is speaking about Encinitas is last week I decided that I wanted to be close to the Kriya Yoga in SF and I wanted to be in Encinitas. And so I rented a house for August to surf and to finish my book and to be doing Kriya. So we're totally in sync with all these things.
That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as far as what I took away from these events so far, it was, as I mentioned, everything I ever wanted. I understood that it's like well within reach. Like in any given moment, the task for me isn't like, oh my gosh, I have to go answer emails and then I can relax. Or like, oh my gosh, I have to go build my business more and then I can relax. Or, oh my gosh, I have like whatever the thing was that I thought I would have to do. At least for me, and in general, I think it's something many people experience is like there's something they have to do in order to, I guess we can say like, again, another semi-cliche, but like in order to be worthy, like they have to go do something. I realized like I literally just have to become a master of let's say, creating and or pulling in the emotions that I'd like to feel at any moment and connecting to those frequencies.
Yes.
And that's all I really want. And if I can do that, then everything else works. So much so that not only does Dispenza teach this, but I've experienced it. Like, if I can just get to the state where I want to be, then everything is the way I want it to be because I just feel the way I want to feel. And then the thing is, there are certain circumstances or situations or things that can come up that I would, as Dispenza would say, like I would use to reaffirm an old neuro pathway or an addiction to like an old emotion. And my test is to maintain that elevated state of being where I want to be.
Yes.
And like, it could be as simple as like we're sitting here doing this podcast and like I'm just, let's say, just want to like work on being like super overjoyed and happy. But like I'm afraid that if I were to be like overjoyed and happy and like my true childlike inner self, that like you of all people, and I don't actually think you would, but like would judge me or be like weird or like, you know, and so
that's the fear.
It's a very simple example and present, but I could totally see that because like if we really shine, as you were sharing to me off the air earlier, you feel more vulnerable because you're showing yourself. And it's like, what if I show myself? It's like in relationships, like what if I show myself and then I'm rejected? But like, then also received. Understanding that that's not about you, and that's another thing to overcome like that. But people would use like perceived rejection from someone else as another example of like another way to reaffirm the addiction to suffering. Like, oh, like I showed myself that person didn't like me. Oh, boohoo, I have to be miserable. Versus like I shine my light, they reacted the way they did, and my past self may have perceived it X, Y, or Z way, but my new self is like, I'm still happy. Woohoo! So it's affected me in many ways. I mean, I would say like, so my business, when I started Dispenza, I was very, compared to now, out of touch with myself. So my business was going well, like largely because of just how great the product is and again, how great the idea is. And then I'd go on podcasts like Luke's Story and this one, for example, although this is our first one, but podcasts like this one and like yours, and just speak, and people would be like resonant with the message. And I had people like Ben Greenfield like reaching out to me just through email because he heard me on a podcast years ago when I was 18 and was like, hey, you know, what you're doing is really interested. Like, I'd love to chat. And so he and I became good friends through that. And then like several other people, very prominent people in Silicon Valley and in music and in sports and so on, have just come that way. And so that's been very cool for the business. However, I was not, in my own case, I wasn't like leaning in for a while. So I started it out of high school. So the first now we're about to hit 5 years. First 4 years, like I was running it, but from a place of like victimization, which is so weird because like I had income to travel wherever I want, do whatever I want. You would think on a superficial level that like you'd be stoked and like, cause it's like what people call the dream. Like you could have as much income as you want to do the things you want to do, to go where you want to go and do the things you want to do when you want to do it. And I could have organized everything in such a way that I could have just been like, you know, working and having fun and surfing and training and going places and seeing people. But like I didn't, not because I couldn't, but because like I didn't believe I could. So it just, for me, you know, there's, I think, no better place, at least for me, my soul, this incarnation, to have understood the fact that material success cannot bring happiness. It's not capable of creating happiness because it's not where it comes from, unless the person already has the happiness, and then the material success just is an external reflection of that. But I tried to do it the other way around. Now I'm lucky that I was like a 19-year-old, you know, learning these lessons, 18, 19, 20, 21. Now I'm 22. Rather than like a 60-year-old who's like worked so hard his whole life just to realize like this isn't it. Like I realized this isn't it at like 18, 19, and I still struggled for a while. All that's to say, I was seeing my business as like a limiter from what I considered in my mind like the big mission, which is like learn, teach, educate, build more advanced products, lighting products. And so on a daily basis though, my actual daily experience was like, I have to get up and I have to do all this work. Like this is slowing me down from like the long term. And that wasn't true upon looking back. Like the business was always, yes, there were challenges I had to overcome, but those were my challenges, not even the business. There was a part of me that was thinking that like the dream life would be without challenges, like that I'd be able to be like the dude who's like successful, living his life, doing what he wants, and like not have to overcome challenges, which means really just not overcoming my own emotions.
Right.
And that wasn't true. So that's to say that the business was has been always my greatest reflection. I was leaning out for several years, like even though still doing stuff, still running it, but like energetically, I wasn't like leaning in, right? I was like, oh, this is tough. This is so hard. It's limiting me. I can't do the other bigger projects I want to focus on because I'm stuck. And really, once I got into Dispenza, I started playing, well, like, what would it feel like if I already was building the company of my dreams, creating new innovative products that are totally like nothing that has ever been created in light therapy, working with the best people in the world, leading light experts, and working with all the celebrities who've, come to me and actually taking advantage of these opportunities that I was thinking, oh, my business is stopping me from that because I'm so busy.
Right.
Which was, again, only a creation of myself. What would it feel like if that was all happening and I was just focusing on podcasts and focusing on the stuff that I have to do to spread the message, and I had a great team? And so the more I connected that energy, it was a start. Finally, like Dispenza will say, he'll say he'll say people only change often when there's like a death or diagnosis. And so for me, it wasn't like either of those. It was actually like my business was like on the brink of like financial destruction. Even though it was still selling, you could be making a ton of money in revenue, but then be overspending and not running things efficiently and basically, bleeding yourself out. And that's what I was doing because I was like leaning out. I wasn't like getting in, facing the problems, overcoming. It got to a point where like I had to face it finally. And it was so painful and difficult for me because I had to face like, and it coincided with a relationship I was in at the time that like I was sort of treating in the same way. Like I wasn't leaning in and like giving it the attention it deserved, / I wasn't like being honest with my feelings. I was like leaning out, not really appreciating this person who really loved me and cared about me. And I also felt the same way, but I wasn't even like in touch with that at all. And similarly to the business. So anyway, things started to get really tough. And then the relationship, like kind of like, let's say it had just fizzled out and this person had sort of moved on. And that was totally like right in many ways. And yet my business was also in such a tough spot. So I was just forced to like, and this is after 2 Joe Dispenza events going into a 3rd, I was just forced to like really reevaluate everything and just like try to, in what felt like it was terrifying. I was scared that I would lose my whole business. Like, what am I going to do? Like, it's going to be so hard to start something new, to keep this freedom that I've kind of attached myself to, which is another attachment. And I finally just tried to take in as much of this Joe Dispenza wisdom as possible. It wasn't easy and it still hasn't been perfect, but I asked myself, like in this, let's say, dark night of the soul, like, who would I want to be? Like, what would I want my business to look like? What would it be? And, the first thing above all was like, well, it's always been raw optics. And I've been saying for years, like, eventually it's just going to be raw. So I went and like put an extra $5,000 on credit cards just to buy the domain raw.life, which relative to what I already had on, that's not like a massive expense per se for us. But it was just like a sort of symbolism. Like, if we make it through this, at least I'm going to own this domain. Because that's the future. I want it to be raw. And raw.com is owned by Rheumatoid Arthritis Foundation. So we'll get that when we cure that with light therapy. And so
I like that goal.
Yeah, I mean, it's just inevitable. And so basically, that was like one step in the right direction that like was like, all right, this is where we're going. And I was like in the deepest, darkest challenge. And I was like, I see the light. Like, that's where we're going, even if it takes time. I had to let go of 2 employees I had hired. Again, instead of hiring them to support me on my excited mission leaning in, I was like hiring them to try, like as a young kid, like the boy versus man, let's say, like as the boy who didn't want to have to do the work. So just trying to hire someone to do it for me. But like there's no success in that path because like then they're just coming into like a sinking ship versus like helping sail a successful ship further forward faster.
Yes.
Further forward faster. That was sounded kind of cool. and yeah, so I had to like, it was really to go from having 2 employees and then having to do basically not everything, because I have contractors who run a lot of stuff, but like to do everything internally myself was like, a lot. And so, yeah, Raw is like, I'd say like, it's interesting. We're a small team. I'm like revealing how small of a team it is, but
I love that.
It's really cool because to me, people always are like judging based on superficial things like, oh, you have a 20-person team, you must be successful. It's like, yeah, if you're running it well and you're happy, amazing. But like most people I've met who have really big teams are stressed.
Right.
It's like, I'd rather have a 3-person team and be making way more money. Like relative team size to how much the business makes, we're in a really different position. And I'm happy to be here and not have to be stressed and not managing a ton of people and build something super efficient rather than massive, because it's just way better. From building that solid foundation of efficiency over scale will just, it's the foundation for a really successful organization. So that's where we are. And so anyway, all that's to say to your question is a bit of a long answer, but I started implementing these ideas of like, which I directly derived from Dispenza of like, what would it feel like if I was actually doing the things I want to do? And after enough time, I was thinking, well, I always said I'm going to start working on lights. It's like I'm connected with the top light therapy, human-centric light therapy experts in the world. Like, why don't I just start reaching out to them and asking them where they would start if I was to develop the best lighting therapy products in the world,
right?
Like actual devices that you shine light on yourself with, better than red light therapy and anything else that's out there. And I started getting directions, started going deeper. It ended up clicking with one of these guys I connected with was just kind of phasing out of a different career or a different thing and was like looking for something kind of new. And like, he's like 60 years old, one of the legends, let's say, in this world. And it just clicked where it was like a lot of an alignment. And we had even had a challenge in the past and something we had tried to work together on with someone else. And it was just like created not such I had to regain trust, I guess, because it was interesting, but it worked out really well. I had never did anything wrong or had even negative intentions, but like a certain business deal we try to go, sometimes people can perceive like, oh, this person's just trying to do this or get information or that. And so I had to like, even though again, I knew my intentions were pure, I had like someone else's perceptions of they thought my intentions weren't pure. And so I had to kind of like regain my trust. And so it was even more profound that we had this opportunity to work together. Anyway, so it's like a year later, almost since this Dark Night of the Soul challenge time, it's like I am now transitioning the business to the overarching Raw Optics will always stay the eyewear line, but the overarching raw life, raw living, just raw. We will have the best light therapy products in the world that we're developing now. I just had a phone call this morning again, and so it's just constantly moving very quickly. And that should be like beginning of next year, I would say, sometime in early 2023. And so everything's going really well. Like I've stepped into, especially being in Austin this week, like just podcast, meeting with all the people I wanted to meet with. And like leaning into that and like realizing that the more I do of that and connect to that energy, the less that all the office work, as I call it, like the computer stuff, the admin stuff that I still do quite a bit of, is just like it becomes less relevant because I'm doing the right stuff and I can kind of like let go of the stress. Like, is it all going to work out? Is it all going to work out? Is everything, am I doing what I need to do to make sure we're all good?
Right.
Like I can let go of that because if I'm doing the right stuff, it's like, if I don't get back to like 100 emails I have or whatever it might be, it's like, it's fine. Cause like, I know at least I have a good assistant, looking over a lot of stuff. And and I'm starting now to rebuild a team from the place of leaning in and being excited. I asked myself, the big question was like, again, Dispenza inspired. It was like, what would be a company or an organization that I would feel really good about creating? Like really good, like where, because the problem was not that Raw Optics wasn't helping people. It's changed a lot of people's lives and transformed people's sleep, and people who couldn't sleep through the night for 10 years now sleeping through the night. Like the impact is there. And I just didn't feel it. And I think the reason why was because, one, we weren't collecting reviews, which was not smart for a long time. I just didn't even think about it. But again, if you're at a lower frequency, you don't think about the good ideas. You waste time on dumb stuff and you don't focus on the right ideas. When you're addicted to that suffering state, you don't want to like move forward. I created my suffering. I was stuck. That's what everyone does, actually. And people will be like, no, it's my circumstances. Like, no, it's not your circumstances. It's definitely you.
Right.
And us, not just you. It's me. It's everyone creating that. But I asked myself, like, what would it really feel like that I could actually get up every day? Because I'm going to work hard. Like, that's sort of inevitable. I realized, like, I'm going to work hard or at least put a lot of my being into something like that's. I realized there's no getting around that. And I wouldn't want to get around that is what I realized. I was also battling for years with this idea, like from Tim Ferriss and the 4-Hour Workweek, which is like that the dream is to lay on the beach and like drink margaritas. And it's like, no, that's not the goal. Jordan Peterson, who's someone I really look up to, you may be familiar with, is very great at kind of explicating how like the goal isn't to just sit and drink more Mai Tais or whatever on the beach all day. Not that Tim Ferriss says that's the goal either, but that's kind of what I took from his 4-Hour Workweek, like that was the goal. Right. And so to have that level of freedom, and it is actually to have that level of freedom that you could do what you want, but then the fulfillment isn't in just sitting and doing nothing, it's in actually doing something. You can see that in people. I have a great friend in Austin who doesn't need to work, make any money. I think you know him, but yeah, he's gone out trying to do something really momentous in, and this is Justin Rezvani, I guess, to give him a shout out in Zion. Like he's great, he's successful. I just saw him the other day. He doesn't need to, as far as I understand, doesn't need to work, but he's doing something with Zion, the social media company he's trying to build, like because he believes in it. And that's super fulfilling, I believe. Yeah. So a long answer, but I feel it's necessary. I asked myself, like, I'm going to be doing something. What would be something I'd be really excited about? And I was like, well, if I could build a company and I can do anything, because right, we're the creators. It's like, I'd want to build the next Apple, right? Like, why not? And so I was like, well, I should read Steve Jobs' biography. That'd be a great place to start. And so I didn't really think I want to build the next Apple. I felt more like, what inspiration do I need? So the energy came first. Then I read his biography. I'm like, oh, we're going to build the next Apple, at least in the world of light therapy. Yeah. And it was interesting as I had this idea as I was reading, and then I went further and further through the book. And towards the end, he even prophesized. He's like, in the same way he said, speaking about his son, because his son, he said, the only good thing about my cancer, or one of the only, good things that came out at least, was that he's like, my son got to work with some really killer doctors studying oncology. Because he ended up connecting with all the top doctors, and his son could go do internships or whatever. And he's like, I really feel that in the 21st century, like just in the 20th century, the big thing was the developments in computers technology. Like the big thing in the 21st century is going to be the intersection of biology and technology. And I'm like, where else is it going to be other than in light? Like I couldn't think of anything. Supplements, like it's all old. People have been doing this for so long. No one's cured the diseases, like meaningfully made really significant impacts. But light and mitochondrial therapy and these things are clearly the future, as well as spiritual work, which is light work in a sense. And I realized like the goal of my company, something that I could be really excited about, would be to have a company where we're creating products. But it's like the products aren't the end either. Like I don't want to create products just for the sake of creating products. I want to create products that inspire people and inspire them to the potential of life, and especially to the potential of what we would call the unlimited power within. So it's like we're creating lights to shine light on our own inner light and power. And that's something I was like, I could get up out of bed every day and work really whatever I needed to do for that, because that for me is something worth working for. And it all came from an energy place to form. And now it's like it's all sort of actually happening. And it's, Dr. Joe says like, it's none of your business how it happens, but like it started happening, multiple emails from this particular person I was hoping to work with, like no responses. And I was like, oh gosh, like this. And then perfect, it worked out. There was a response, and not just that, but like the words I had chosen for my email, because it was the truth, because I connected to that energy, happened to be perfectly resonant with something that had like been sort of his stated life mission for many years. And I just happened to intuit what felt true to me, ended up being the exact words that, he had used for decades to describe his mission as well. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of freakily coincidental, but not at all. So how has Joe Dispenza affected me? As you can imagine, like really profoundly, because I don't know what else I'd be doing. I'd probably still be in a victim mindset or worrying, or maybe hopefully I would have found another person sharing these same truths. But now it's here, and now it's like we're doing this podcast, and I'm excited because I get to create the future, and I feel pretty stoked about the way things are going now, because I took the time and put in the energy, like he says, and put in the work. He says, are you doing the work to overcome the parts of myself that were limited and afraid, to get to a place where I was and am more willing to hold the vision of the future, regardless of what the external circumstances are that come up, that some part of me may want to use to reaffirm an addiction or connection or crutch, like, and use the past as that crutch.
Yes. You know, I love what you were saying, and what it's got me thinking of is the fear never goes away. It's not supposed to. It's just about our ability to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And in my meditation this morning, I was thinking about pain and I was thinking about fear. And this line came to me. It was like, put your head in the fear's mouth without letting it swallow you. And this idea of just like leaning into it and being like, oh, I see this for what it is. Okay. And just holding hands with it and just agreeing to take one more little step. And what I hear you so beautifully reflecting in your story is, this happens for a lot of entrepreneurs, is the first stage is just kind of, I hope I make it. I hope I make it. I hope things come together. And then things start to come together. And then there's this overwhelming influx of opportunity. And then we get, I almost said we have to, but we get the opportunity to learn about our boundaries, about our energetic discernment, because we no longer have the capacity to say yes to everything. And this is where so many of us get stuck in like the action and the hamster wheel of the doing and the emails. And what I heard you do was recalibrate to your highest excitement. And even though you have, you know, a DM inbox and an email inbox and text that look like a swamp that you could answer till the end of time, you didn't go to those. You actually went to your higher being, your insides, and you said, well, what would actually be in highest excitement? It would be pursuing this project. So let me take the energy I would have spent doing all these other distracting things and actually ask for what I want and allow myself the potential to receive it and entrain myself with the feelings of receiving it now. And you addressed that so beautifully. It was like what Joe said with when we put a time limiter on something and we say, well, someday, or maybe then I'll feel, it's like we're holding a carrot at the end of the stick. And that's whenever we say someday or then I will, perpetually, no matter where we're walking in time, that carrot is always away from us. We are innately holding it away from ourselves, even in the way that we speak about it. And we're limiting because we don't believe it can actually occur.
Yeah. And I would even add to that like, I still do the emails, actually. Like, I still do them, and the text and the Instagram DMs and the affiliate applications and a lot of stuff that I may have someone else do them, but they're still being done largely by me. However, once I put that project that I wanted to focus on first, and I really leaned into that, and now I have started leaning into that. I have, I'm having a weekly call to advance this project, and I'm doing a lot. We're doing a lot of sort of off the phone, just planning and scheming, and it's coming together like in not long, in 2 months. We've made tremendous progress, and it is giving me so much inspiration, having connected to that energy. So it's interesting. If you connect to negative energy and you create circumstances in your life, then you constantly reaffirm that negative energy. So in this case, I overcame enough to connect to that more divine, let's say, energy, inspired energy, create this circumstance in my life where it is interesting. Like the biggest overcoming is the first one, I think, because now it's like I have this situation that even if I were to drop my energy, it kind of reaffirms. I've created a circumstance in my life, just like getting new friends, like that reaffirms that positivity if I decide to go down.
And like you're still getting emails. So it's not that the actual environment changes or the circumstance necessarily changes. And Dr. Joe says it's our relationship to it. So suddenly these things that felt so burdensome before can feel like a joy because you're allowing yourself to view it that way. And one of my mentors, Neil Donald Walsh, said to me last month, we were on a call and he said, you can't be the victim and the hero of your story at the same time. He was telling me about situations in his life when he was younger where he was growing and he was growing in notoriety and people were getting to know him, and he felt really sort of like isolated in his experience. It was like, great, I'm this for all these people, but like, who's this for me? And he was in the shower, and he had this message kind of come from God or source that just said, you're trying to be the victim and the hero of your own story at the same time. So you want to be in that place of shining. You want to be in that place of prominence, and yet you want to feel sad about it or bad about it or special about it. And this is one way that so many of us siphon off our life force energy and keep ourselves spiraling at a lower vibratory state. And again, going back to the idea of choosing our challenge is from Mark Manson's work, This Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And he says, you got to choose your shit sandwich. So it's all this evaluation of, is this thing, this relationship, this person, this situation, is this the shit sandwich I want to eat? Because everything in life has some sort of sucky part to it. It's just, can you allow yourself to enjoy the suck? Is it in your zone of genius a little bit? Is it like this edge you're surfing, and it's kind of fun and dangerous and scary in some ways, but it's pushing you and it's growing you. And the moment we can reframe that for ourselves, we reclaim all of our power, and things just infinitely expand.
Yeah, I would be inclined to just fully reject that idea from Mark Manson, just because like some people may choose to accept it and it may fit in the context and it may be useful. However, I think like from Dispenza's perspective, or from like a Kriya perspective, a more evolved perspective, not only is it like kind of profane, like shit sandwich, and like pretty disgusting if you actually think about it. Because like if you're tuned into energy, like you think like you don't want to eat a sandwich with shit, like that's disgusting.
It's true.
It's like I wouldn't call that into my life, but people can if they want.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read that book, and now I'm glad I haven't. And so it's obviously superficial. I mean, I'm sure the guy's a great guy and has great intentions, but it's very much just like a book I saw on the shelves the other day at Sun Life Organics, which is like called Get the Bleep Out of the Sun.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by a beauty blogger, very well known, very famous, but like they're just espousing like complete lies from decades of bad science about the sun, and like convincing young girls to like get out of the sun. And the posts were very much, people received them very well. I also learned a lesson because I was very aggressive in the beginning, and then I had a chance for reflection. Like, I'm sure this woman's a nice woman, and they're just misguided. What they're teaching people about avoiding all the sun. And so I did change my tone and like modify my captions to be more just focused on science, and I took my ego and like the finger pointing and like that kind of ad hominem stuff out,
right?
Which was very smart, I think.
Yeah.
But the message stayed. I didn't like delete the posts, even though I was a little nervous.
Sounds like a beautiful process over all of that, though.
It was interesting, certainly. So anyway, about this,
shit sandwich,
not delicious sandwich.
Yeah,
I'm prefer to fill my life with delicious sandwiches, and it's like I seriously.
I know, I love this. I'm on board.
Yeah, I just like Of course, there are challenges. A good friend of mine who's a yogi, who is the first person yogi, Kriya yogi, as I mentioned, and practicing Ayurvedic doctor, very wise. He's one of the top doctors in Russia in this world. Not public, but really great guy and a close friend, and he explains that for men, because men and women have different energy systems, which is also really different and are interesting, and no one talks about, very few people speak about this in the Western world. This is one of the reasons I love Jordan Peterson, because he's not afraid to touch on these truths, even if it like leads to public crucifixion and like having the leftists like wanting to take his head off, but because their creed is like fundamentally violence and coercion and hatred at its core, and racism as well, actually. Because like I just saw the most interesting clip from a friend of mine, Chris Williamson, who now lives in Austin. He's a British guy, but he moved here. He has a great podcast. He's interviewed Peterson twice and another dude, and I don't know who the dude was, but he was saying something. It was like a short piece, but if you said like, for example, that like to be black is bad, and that like don't ever try not to be black, and that like everything about being black was bad, like you'd be a racist completely. Yeah. And like don't even try not to be black because you can't do that. But that's exactly what they're saying about white people. So it's like their creed is what they say they're not, which is it's exactly visible when you look at it, because it's full of contradictions and self-hatred and all this stuff. But that's a different conversation. We don't need to go that route at the moment. But so from the energy perspective of male-female energy dynamics, like I've been taught that according to the ancient scriptures and ancient traditions, the idea is that men thrive the most through constant overcoming of themselves primarily, and women thrive, the women's female energy system thrives through relaxation. And so many men are becoming feminized by either being told or taught or feeling or whatever that like they don't need to work hard or like overcome themselves or at least work at all, period, or work smarter. Because I actually don't even believe really in working hard, so to speak, anymore. I believe in working intelligently, but it doesn't need to be hard in the sense like, because there's this whole separate conversation when I remember the thread of male, female, but working hard is a fallacy because, and I bought into it fully and worked way too hard for way too long. And so it's like this whole societal thing where it's like, oh, if you work hard, like you're working 16 hours a day, like you got respect, bro. Like you're committed. And I think like, no, like I reject that too. I think that's false.
Yeah, that's not a very good indicator of success.
No, in fact,
number of hours
that's
worked.
Exactly, but that's what it's used, at least it is actually as a fact. It's used as like the dude, at least for among men, I don't know otherwise, but the people I speak with, especially guys, like if you're just like cranking out hours, like you get some sort of like unwritten respect, like, oh dude, you're grinding, like you get respect. And if someone was to say like, I only work 3 hours a day, like, oh dude, like you clearly aren't committed. Like in a way, that's something I've sensed, and it's very much a part of the philosophy of like hard hitting entrepreneurs. Just hard hitting by itself kind of implies that. But so I think the person I would prefer to look up to would be the person who, and this is a reason I was drawn to Tim Ferriss, like the person who does have that balance, you know. And that's one thing I do really admire about at least his writing. And I don't know what his life is like now. That was like decades ago, the 4-hour work week. But the person who can work in a balanced way, work 3-4 hours a day, 5-6 hours a day, even maybe more if they want, or not if they don't want to, and do something meaningful by focusing and actually working like properly in those hours and not being on their phone 50% of the time, or doing like menial work, like in my case, maybe doing like sticking to lower energy and doing menial emails or whatever that don't actually matter, versus like overcoming myself, which happens usually in a meditation and it leads to better work. Overcoming myself and doing the right things, even if I had to overcome some emotion, some addiction to the wrong stuff. Anyway, so that's just a tangent. Like for anyone who might hear this, like it's an invitation to like not think that grinding is in any way admirable. And again, this is another thing I learned through this yogi doctor friend of mine. He's also my doctor. Like I would tell him like, I'm working so hard. And it's like, why? Like, I don't understand what for. Because I believe that that's the admirable and right thing to do, is to work really hard. He's like, this is why you shouldn't work hard. Like, it's not intelligent. It's not good for you. What's the point of working hard and making a ton of money if you're not enjoying your daily life? And that's another cliche, but like people don't really think about it. Like, it's really true. Like, why would you work hard and be exhausted? Now, if you can like, if you want to work hard by all means. I'm not trying to tell people what to do, but I'd rather work what they say smart or intelligently and get better results. Like working hard is just like it's like a cop out. Like people,
well, it's honestly scarcity. Like, no, I don't care how much financial abundance that you have. You can still be in a scarcity mindset with your overworking and your overdoing because it's never enough for you.
Yeah, I feel it's like a cop out also. In other words, like because I did it for years. Like, oh, I'm working hard, like as if working really hard and being the victim. It's a victim mentality at its core. Depending on how it's used. If someone's excited and they're like, I'm working hard, I'm killing it, I love my life, great. But mostly, from my experience, I'll speak to myself only, and maybe if someone resonates with it, they can take it. Like I was using it as like a victim mentality, like I'm working so hard as if I deserve some sort of reward for my hard work, which that's just not how it works. So then about the masculine feminine duality. So females thrive, the energy system thrives through relaxation. Now, it doesn't mean women shouldn't also overcome themselves to some degree and men shouldn't also relax. Like that's very much a core part of this Ayurvedic traditional philosophy. Like, in fact, that we should, not work so much and actually relax a lot as men, but also when we work, like really overcome yourself and really focus and really do the right things and be super present. And so actually have a meaningful impact. And then same way for like women, I would imagine like, of course you have to have some discipline and overcome yourself. It's not like you should sit around and eat, Ben and Jerry's all day, right? Like that wouldn't be good for anyone either. But it was just interesting to learn that, that's how the systems work.
Well, and again, it's all about balance. Like every single one of us is on a spectrum, regardless of gender. There's no one size fits all for anybody. Everything we're talking about here is just ideating, is just suggesting. And I think what I hear is on like a global level, of course, we see these pervasive themes threaded throughout humanity and threaded throughout our biology, but really important always, like with this information that we're sharing here and with all things, for each one of us to check in with our inner discernment and say, does this resonate for me? And hearing you talk about the masculine overcoming and the feminine, relaxation, those things aren't activating for me because there is some truth in it. Although there could be some people listening to this that get very activated by that suggestion.
Typically that would be like women who are like hard-hitting entrepreneurs who are stressing their energy system and men who are lazy.
Potentially. But what's also interesting about this is, again, here's somebody whose work I've read, which a lot of it resonates and some of it doesn't, but David Data's work, and tying into what you just said about men overcoming themselves, he talks about a man's primary drive in life being kind of like his dharma. And that should actually be his number one, even when the woman in his life wants her to be the number one. Secretly, she actually wants his dharma to be number one. And for a woman, and this ties into the relaxation, is the idea of safety. So really, like on a biological level, that makes complete sense for me. If we're procreating with this species, that women want to feel safe. And in order to be safe, like we have to be relaxed. We have to feel safe with whom we're with in order for our species to be viable and to continue. So of course, there's room in all this, but all this is to say we can absolutely see how these become pervasive energetic blueprints throughout humanity. And we get to, each of us as individuals, look at that, be with that, relax into the edges of that, pick and choose, see which parts of it resonates, and throw the rest away. And we get to be the creators of our own experience here.
Yeah, for sure. And at the same time, another thing I've learned about this while studying this ancient Ayurvedic philosophy is that there are two different ways of ascertaining or obtaining knowledge. One is through going out and doing something yourself and having the experience and making the mistakes and experiencing the consequences and then learning the lesson. And the other is trusting the wisdom of someone who's already experienced it. Right. But they have to be like a master. You have to have a good detector for who is actually wise and taking the right lessons or transmitting the truth.
Right.
And apparently, according to the ancient perspective as well, the only condoned method, the correct method, is not doing it all yourself and trusting the judgment. In other words, like, don't be the guy who, like the kid who's, your parents are like, you shouldn't do that. Like, you're going to get hurt. Like, and then you go out and do it and you get hurt, maybe dangerously, maybe you die. And like, better to have trusted your parents. Now, that doesn't mean like I haven't gone out many times in my life and like done stupid stuff that I knew was stupid because my soul or something wanted to learn that lesson myself. But I can understand, even though it's like not desirable, because we all want to go out and have experiences and listen and not have to just follow someone else's instructions, I think, or not, maybe not all of us, but for sure me, I would prefer to be able to just go out and do stupid things and learn the lessons myself and make the mistakes, and whether it's with my way of eating or this or that. But like deep down, I also resonate very much with this idea and truth, because I know that if I have the direction from a master, it would be better. It'd be like in the case of a master, especially if you have like a guru, let's say, who's like your true spiritual connection, and they say like, you do this. Like the idea is like, you should do this because they are more connected and they know what's right. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, ultimately, even if you have to overcome some part of your limited knowledge, because we don't have that greater perspective that they have, it's that overcoming of that limited knowledge, then you can receive this blessing, this truth, this result maybe faster and better than if you said, no, I don't want to trust that guy. Like in that way, we might say from a reincarnation perspective, you like delay your exit from the cycle of samsara. It doesn't mean you're never going to get off, but it's just if you want to go whoosh, fast.
Yeah.
So that's why when I found this teacher, as a disciple as well of the same master of yours, I was like, this is, at first I was like, no way, I'm not interested. Like also, Ayurveda is much more plant-based leaning diets, even vegan than, and I was like really into paleo, especially at the time. So I was like, no way, I'm not touching this stuff. But I've become more and more interested in the overall philosophy, and there's, I think, a lot to be learned. All that's to say from ancient principles. And so, yeah, I don't speak these things as if like someone should do this or has to do this, of course. Like it's sort of my worldview and this connected to this ancient philosophy of Ayurveda and also yoga, Kriya yoga and so on. And so if someone doesn't connect or they don't resonate or they're not interested, then like let that be. Of course, like, people can create their own realities, as you said, live in their own world. But if someone is interested and they want to learn more, then I think that's also a victory here.
Yeah.
But to me, my logic is that like, if you can listen to the ancient wisdom and people have gone through like many or all even of the human challenges that humans have in a human life and found like sort of the answers. And yeah, we could say, oh, our 21st century life's super different, but it seems to be the case that the general theme of human challenges follow the same arcs. And so that's why like Shakespeare literature from hundreds of years ago and ancient stories from thousands of years ago, the Bible and, all these other stories, the Bhagavad Gita and all these other stories are like still very much pertinent today, probably more so than much of what is written today.
Because truth is truth. And when you hear the truth, you just know it. You just know it in your body. You know it in your experience. And that's why these truths have stuck around for so long. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, I would love to talk to you more about light. And I would love to talk to you more about Ra optics. And Ra, if I'm not mistaken, is Egyptian sun god,
yes,
correct?
That's correct.
Sweet. So that's a really cool, inspired name. I'm really into ancient Egypt. We've had some people on the show talking about ancient Egypt and extraterrestrials and architecture and sacred geometry. So shout out to Adam Apollo, my man. If people haven't heard that episode, it's a really juicy one. But I'm curious, what inspired you to choose that name? And do you have that connection to ancient Egypt? And then as much as you want to tell about your health story and what got you into this exploration of light, and we can get into some of the science of it after that.
Yeah, of course. Well, for someone with a company named Ra, I know very little about ancient Egyptian history, I have to say. I've actually been very much compelled to watch the Gaia TV series, Ancient Civilizations.
Yeah.
And now I realize that's probably why, because like I do want to learn more about it, but I've been busy and I haven't been thinking of myself as a person with unlimited time. I've been thinking of myself as a person like scarcity for the past years.
Yeah.
So only recently have I started to feel like I have unlimited time. And it's so funny because like I actually started to feel, and it's really weird, but after feeling it enough and starting to change my life a bit and doing more of the right things, especially these days in Austin, and it helps that the days are much longer in the light span because I live by the sun. So when the days are short, I go to sleep at like 7 or 8 when the sun goes down, and when the days are long.
So your circadian rhythms are snapped in.
I could do better for sure.
You could
but
do better.
You can always be better. I'm mostly with eating and maintenance of my energy cycle, meaning like I've overworked myself for far too long. And so even if I eat properly on the light diet and follow the light, I've found that my body will still demand to sleep in later sometimes than I'd like. Now, for me, what that means is like I sleep until sunrise because I'd like to wake up 1 to 2 at least hours before sunrise, but I don't hit that every day. And I've discovered, despite nutrition and all this other stuff, it's because I've been overworking and overexerting myself. And there's some level of like prana that like cannot be rejuvenated if you overexhaust yourself during the day.
Talk about why because some people listening to this show will have a great understanding of all the science behind this and all the melatonin and serotonin. And some people will have absolutely no concept of circadian rhythms or any of that. So for those listening who are newer to this journey, why would one want to wake up with the sun?
Of course. I will let's put a pin here. I will answer your question about Ra one more time.
Yeah.
The reason I picked the name was because I was on social media and I saw a guy I was following a lot at the time, Dr. Jack Kruse, really, really great, very intelligent guy about light. I've sort of moved on in many ways to more spiritual teachings, but he's the most knowledgeable guy I would say about light, mitochondria, energy, and biology, and tying pieces together in ways that no academic is doing, only like a sort of, let's say, confident, ballsy blogger genius would do. And maybe it's not all perfectly on point, but the majority is like super, super fire. And if it weren't for that, for him particularly, I would not likely be in this space or have this company and be spreading this message. So big shout out. He had made a meme that said, Ra is my ma. Like he would make these memes with like pictures and it was like a selfie in the sun and it was like, Ra is my ma. Now I guess Ra was more of masculine, but of course it rhymes. So it was pretty cool. I guess you do Ra is my pa also, but ma made more sense. And so, and I was just like, Ra. And then when the business had started, it started as what I called Matt's custom blue blockers, because we were calling them blue blockers at the time. Now I call them light therapy eyewear or light therapy lenses. And
is there a distinction there for you between blue blockers?
So blue blockers are just boring, just to say the least. It's just a bad name. It's like just blocking light for like, it's like, what's blue light? And like, why would you want to block it? And like, but isn't blue light from the sun good? And it's like, yeah, but only during the day and when it's the full spectrum of light, not from an artificial source, because that disrupts your sleep. So that sort of touches your other question. But anyway, we had Matt's custom blue blockers. We were in my garage where we started and we were tinting lenses of frames people would send to us. So it was like a custom service. And then someone was like, well, why don't you just offer a set line? And I was like, that's a great idea. And I was like, well, I have my blog website, mattmaruca.com, or had, I don't use it now, maybe one day, but mattmaruca.com. If I did have a personal blog now, it'd be thelightdiet.com, which I also have, but I haven't used it. So mattmaruca.com was where this blue blocker thing was. It was a Google form. People filled it out. And I had this idea like, I'm just going to totally go on a different tangent here. But there's a great book called The Lean Startup that I read. I read 3 or 4 books that inspired me about business. 4-Hour Workweek, which we talked about enough, and inspired me to like digital nomad life. I can live anywhere, work anywhere, make money, be part of the new rich, as he calls it. So that was that. I read this book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, which is like creating something new, genuinely new, as opposed to taking something that already exists and scaling it. And in some ways, we're creating something new. Light therapy has been around for a long time, but we're taking we're making it new because like no one's ever done it in a way like Apple did with computers. So we're really going like 0 to 1 on this, and then we will scale it as well. And especially high quality, attractive blue blockers. We were the first. There was like one other who tried to do it, but they failed miserably. Their frames were really bad and the quality was low and they were uncomfortable. They hurt on my face. So anyway, so that was another book, but I had read these well before all this stuff. And I was like seeking for an idea for like a year and a half between my junior and senior year of high school, having been studying health for the preceding 3 years, the first 2.5 years of high school. And so read the books junior year while I was abroad. The third book was The Lean, actually one of them was The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, another Silicon Valley dude. And it was also really interesting. Like the biggest takeaway I remember is like the title. Honestly, it's like the hardest problems like don't have necessarily like clear solutions. Like there's just not like an answer. And it was cool to get that perspective. Like it's not just going to sit down in my lap. Like I got to think, you know, and I might be totally off on what the takeaways from that book were, but that's basically what I got. And then number 4 was The Lean Startup, which is like the manual for how do you move? How do you go? And it's like, turn your business, don't go and build a business plan and take a bunch of funding and waste your time and energy and everyone else's money. Create, if anyone actually wants your product, it shouldn't just be an idea. I have all these, like I have a friend who's always like, I got this idea and it's such a great idea. It's like, well, can you find one person who would pay you for it? One person. And it's like, no, Like, it's like, if you can't find one person to pay for it, no one's going to buy it. So in the lean startup, the idea is, if you run your business like a science experiment. So if you have a hypothesis that something might work, you want to, there's a build, measure, learn feedback loop. So you want to build what's called a minimum viable product to test your hypothesis. So in my case, it was, well, Luke Story, who was our first customer, asked me if I could help him get custom-made blue light blocking glasses, or blue blockers at the time. And I tried to connect him with a company that would do the tinting for him. It was a pain in the butt, the emails, the way my friend and I had done it. But for him, it was like complicated and hard. I had seen an article, how to tint your own blue light blocking glasses. I was like, well, this is great. Let's do that. And I said, I'll do it for you, Luke. And so he sent me his frame. I got the lenses. We tinted it, sent it back to him. And that first payment he made was like what I used to buy the materials, hot plate beaker, like literally chemistry stuff with tints and liquid in my garage.
This is cool.
Lens holders. And then, and that was basically it. It was Matt's Custom Blue Blockers, like a custom lens tinting service with the correct wavelengths, which no one was doing. You had to go through this company.
When you first did
it was like, I had just turned 18 years old, like just weeks before.
Yeah.
And so 2017 in August. And so August going into September. And so that's to say, and it was interesting, the same night that Luke asked for those glasses, it was the night that I asked, hey, I went to his event in New York City, near Philly, where I grew up, because he's from LA, but he happened to be there and I heard it on a podcast. I was like, I'm going to go to his event and ask if I can be on his podcast to teach people about light. So that was my putting out into the world, was like, I'm putting light and trying to spread a good message. And then the universe asked something back of me, like, well, if you're going to spread this message, it was a very profound night. If you're going to spread this message of light into the world, like Luke asked, well, wait, where'd you guys get those blue blockers? So it's like the universe was like, if I had to, personalize the conversation, I was like, yo, God, can I spread this message? And God was like, yeah, but you're going to have to figure out how to deliver the products. Like, that's my task for you. You want to spread the message, and great, but your task is, how do you spread the tools?
Yes.
And I was like, so for years, back to the story of what I was saying, struggling, it was like, I was like, I want to spread the message, but like, I also didn't want to do my part of like figuring out how to provide the tools. And which also ultimately, even though I thought it was like my limiter, was actually funding me the whole time to do everything and connecting me with all these amazing people and so on. So it was a really interesting situation, but that night inspired me to realize this was the opportunity I was looking for. It wasn't light bulbs. It will be soon, but that would have been too early, I think, for that. So the glasses were the lowest hanging fruit to easily feel the effects of light in your life, besides just going out and getting sun in the morning. So my hypothesis was then, wait a minute, like there's probably other people in this community, which Tim Ferriss also talked about, like find a niche, figure out what their needs are, and like present something. And I didn't even try to do it. It just happened by seeking out answers. I ended up in this community. I put minimum viable product. Didn't even think about it. It was just in my subconscious. Google Sheet, Google Form, set up a Google Form, put it out in the community, post in all the Facebook groups, ask the influencers if they'll share it. I got like 65 something responses in the first 2 months, which for me was unbelievable.
Yes, huge.
Like, I had actually gone off to travel in Europe as like a gap year before college. And as we started making money, and I had hired people to basically do the work, and then was going out and meeting the people to build the future, including the person who I'm now working with on light therapy products. I met him in Europe 5-6 years ago in Europe in the fall of 2017. And so anyway, so build. And you have to, when you create the experiment, you have the hypothesis, you build your minimum viable product to test it. You have to have preset criteria that you're going to measure against. Ideally, like an experiment, what variables are you testing for? What's your variable that stays the same, and the ones you're going to look for the modification, the changes in. And so then mine was just, does anyone buy the product? Like unconsciously, like, is anyone interested? And like the answer was yes. And so then the path is learn. It's like, so you learn from that, and then you either choose to persevere, like move forward with the path, or pivot if the answer is not really what your hypothesis had it out to be. I persevered because it proved like we were totally right. He also said in the Lean Startup, take customers' feedback. Not in the beginning necessarily. Like if I just went out and asked people like, what do you want? What products do you want? They might say, oh, well, this would be nice. But like people don't know what they want. That's where Steve Jobs, Henry Ford apparently said, like if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster, horse and buggy, not a car, because they didn't know what a car was.
Right.
So it's like, there's some degree of like, you need to know more of what people want and need or could use than them. But then once you've created something, it can be useful to take their feedback is what I've learned. So I took the feedback of like, when someone said, why don't you just offer set styles? And I was like, genius. I built a minimum viable product website. I didn't go out and raise a ton of money still and do all this stuff. I literally ripped the photos from another glasses website that I was using to send customers to buy their own glasses and send to me. And I picked the 10 frames I liked the most, ripped the photos, put them on my own website, rawoptics.io it was in the beginning. And then people came and bought those just pre-made. And I didn't even carry any inventory. They would order, I would order the frame, it would go to my house, the lenses would be tinted, and we ship it out to them. And so it was like a total drop shipping, complete minimum viable product business. And we didn't start shifting until maybe a year later when it was so proven, it was clear like, there's something here. And so then we went out and found our own manufacturers, and we've just done everything to improve the lenses and the quality of everything these years since then on several levels. So that is to the point about raw, and it wasn't raw, it was Matt's Custom Blue Blockers. When that person asked me, why don't you just create your own line? I was like, well, this is no longer a Matt Maruca thing. Like, this is its own brand. And I wanted, for some reason, intuitively, I was like, this brand needs to stand separate from me. Like, I don't want it to be about me. I just knew it had to be its own thing.
Right.
And there was a lot of like challenge over the years of like, okay, raw optics is like raw optics. Like, what is it? And what does it stand for? And then I'm like Matt Maruca / the Light Diet. Like, what do I stand for? And it's like, well, Raw Optics is a product company. This has been like super interesting to like think into or feel into, but like, Raw Optics is a product business primarily that is based on fundamentally the ideas of the Light Diet. So it's like a physical expression of the Light Diet in product form. And ultimately the two interplay because Raw Optics is based on the Light Diet and feeds people who want to learn more back to the Light Diet principles. And then I go out and teach.
Yep.
And that's basically the relationship between the two as it stands. So yeah, that's where Raw Optics came from. But it just, of course, I decided, as I mentioned, it's going to be just raw.
Yeah.
It's way cooler. It's what we always called it in the garage when we were tinting lenses. Like, yo, how's raw? Like, cool. It was just natural.
Yeah. So with raw, we're getting a great deal of I love the nuance of this business story. Like, as an entrepreneur myself, I'm like cheering you on this journey because
Thank you.
I have also launched a product company and I know what that journey is like. I had my own journey with my company, Lunar Wild, and still do. And you've mentioned the Light Diet multiple times in this podcast, but we've never actually addressed what that actually means to you. And so maybe there's an opportunity there for you to talk about what that is, and then some of the science too behind the products you're creating with Raw.
Sure. So the Light Diet is a protocol that it's an ancient. The Light Diet is an ancient way of living that is about living more on light and less on matter. It's about becoming more divine and less like more divine. Divine comes from a root before Latin, which means to be like of the sky. Daylight, sky god is the root that then fed into Greek and Latin and Hinduism. Like, so the root word is Deus in this Proto-Indo-European language that linguists have put together. And that goes to Deva in Hindu and Sanskrit. I should say it goes to Zeus in Greek and Deus in Latin. They're all derived from the same root, interestingly enough, from India to Greece and Rome. And so to be divine is to be more godly, right? And that's what Kriya Yoga does. It works on burning through karma through certain breath techniques that helps you to be more of energy and less of like worldly matter, and burn through your, as they say, karma, and advance on the cycle, or free yourself really from the cycle of samsara. And so that's really what the Light Diet is. It's actually not mine. I didn't create it. And I'm very fortunate to have what I consider to be one of the best English translations of this ancient wisdom in my possession for this, limited lifespan in this time, and to be able to be like a translator of the Light Diet. So, because I thought in the beginning maybe it was something I had stumbled upon, but certainly it wasn't. I had learned a lot of these ideas from Dr. Jack Kruse, and then when I learned it wasn't just enough to be on just the sunlight and blue light, someone said, actually, interestingly, Luke as well, he said to me, are you sure you don't want it to be the sunlight diet? Like, the Light Diet makes me think it's just about like eating salads and stuff, like a food diet, right? And interestingly, I was like, no, I felt like it had to be the light diet. It was just way cleaner. And it's interesting because it serves like 4 meanings, the words, interestingly. So the first of the light diet is a diet of your light exposure, light meaning electromagnetic radiation. So like sunlight, artificial light, and getting more of the natural light and less of the harmful disruptive artificial man-made light sources. That's one. The second of the light diet would be living more on spiritual light and less on food. So living on, light, like spiritual light, like Jesus spoke about and the ancient scriptures have all spoken about light. Third would be and this only really works in English, not every other language. Some it does, Germanic languages, mostly it does, because light means both electromagnetic radiation in the visible range and lacking mass in English. So it also means a light diet of food. So like eating less food. And that's the number one thing shown to increase lifespan and health also in all studies across everything is calorie restriction. And so it's a lighter diet, which is only really feasible if you're living more on sunlight energy and spiritual light energy. Otherwise, you will suffer when you try to like eat more like a yogi. But it's like, in other words, it's like Joe Dispenza, you put the energy first. You don't try to like starve yourself, although you do have to reduce your calorie intake.
Again,
but you just get to a place where you're living more on spiritual light and sunlight energy, and your need for food diminishes. And you also have to work with discipline generally. And then the fourth, this is just much more interesting, but diet has another meaning, which is a group, and this is a bit of a push, but like there was the diet of worms, like not food diet, but like meetings. A diet in ancient and old English would be like a meeting of people. It's particularly for like governance and so on. So like they would have a diet. It would be like a group of people meeting. And so the light diet is also like, can be like a community, a meeting group of people who are interested in spiritual, all things spiritual. So it has 4 meanings in one,
like that.
Which I feel very fortunate about. We have the Instagram, the .com, the Twitter, Telegram, we got it all somehow. I don't know how. So I feel it was very divine because it seemed very like one of the domains you would spend like 20 or 30 grand on. It was like $60. I was like, wow, interesting.
I like that last one with the idea of diet, meaning like a meeting or being in governance with or being in community, because what immediately came to mind was like the idea of a plant dieta. Like, so when we say dieta, it's like you're going into a relationship with a master plant. So the same could be said for our relationship with light. It's, I want to get to know you. Teach me about your essence.
Interesting. Yeah. So that's the light diet in its definition.
Yeah.
Now, as far as like the ones that we would focus on here, the light diet is a protocol that I'm actively sharing. I have a lot of upgrades to do on it. We have a video course / PDF guide on my website now on rawoptics.com available for purchase, but we don't promote it. And it's not something, how can I say, like it's a great start for those who are really intrigued. However, there's a lot of up-to-dates. Like there's a lot of updates I need to make. So if it interests someone, go for it. Definitely, because it's very good. I've had friends, like a friend who's a movie star who played Moneypenny in James Bond, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, this is really great!" Like super.
So it's a good introductory guide for.
Really, it's a good start. Now I'm gonna have I'm working on like a white paper. I've thought for a long time about writing a book. Everyone's like, "You got to write a book." I'll write a book called The Light Diet one day. If someone else wants to try to beat me to it, be my guest, because I'll still do it anyway. But that's. I'm creating a white paper, like a simple, short thing, so you don't have to like commit to opening a book, just to get the information out as a sort of version 2 of this course I created, but it'll just be more than likely just text. And so the general protocol, if I were to go through it briefly, is so through a daily routine, it would be like wake up ideally a little bit before, like an hour or 2 before the sunrise. Now it's different for men and women though, because men, apparently, as I've learned from Ayurveda. So I'll add, the light diet that I learned from the Western scientific peoples, researchers and so on, bloggers, ultimately led me to Ayurveda and realizing like, wait, these people, like all of this stuff lines up about meal timing and sunlight exposure and circadian rhythms and taking care of your body and your sleep. And I was like, so Ayurveda is actually, which means literally like knowledge about life. Veda means life and Ire means knowledge, I believe. And so, or no, it's the other way around, I believe, because the Vedas are like the books of knowledge, right? Anyway, the Vedas. So like Veda would be knowledge, Ire would be life, I think. Sanskrit wisdom experts, you can correct that for me in the comments or something. But anyway, it's one of the two. And so that's what I was looking for. So the light diet is really just a modern translation of Ayurveda to the best of my ability in a maybe more modern context with maybe some tweaks of things that just didn't exist back then, like artificial light. Like how would they know about artificial light and blocking it? Because like it didn't exist, right? But it definitely disrupts the circadian rhythm. So there are updates to be made, despite the foundation being, through and through solid, in my opinion. And so the protocol, so for women and men, this distinction being about waking up early, according to Ayurveda, the better thing would be for women to relax themselves and not force themselves to wake up early. But for men, it's essential for hormonal health and everything to wake up like at least an hour before sunrise. And if one is not waking up at that time naturally without an alarm, it indicates there's a biological problem. More than likely, they're eating too much food too late in the day, so their body's not resting properly, or they're exhausting themselves too much, or they're just not in a great state of health overall, and their body can't make up the deficit through, no matter they sleep 10 hours. That's not a good sign. And that's where I was referring to, like, I put myself in that situation by overexerting and overworking myself and not riding that like fine line, the Tao as they call it in China, that fine line, that path. If you're on the Tao, if you're on the Tao, you go to sleep and you don't like feel like you're exhausted, and you wake up and you have plenty of energy. If you're not, like, you'll fall asleep feeling exhausted and wake up not feeling fully rested, right? And that can be beyond just diet and lifestyle and sun exposure. It can be just overexhaustion,
chronic fatigue,
overexertion.
Adrenal.
There's that too. So anyway, waking up early is the key, and getting morning sunlight exposure, because morning sunlight exposure sets our body's rhythm to run the way it's supposed to run. And so basically that is, it's key. I mean, to just put it really simply, because this podcast has gone into much, like, I'd say in a good way, deeper concepts for people who want to really get like full details of the light diet. You can check out my podcast with Luke Story, like the first two. Those are really like more detailed on the science. But here it's, I think, better to give the overview. You want to get morning sunlight to turn on your body and circadian rhythm. And I think your listenership will intuitively understand this more than maybe others. So morning sunlight, 10 to 15 minutes as early as you can, ideally around sunrise. These are the light pieces of the light diet. So wake up early, get morning sunlight, 10 to 15 minutes at least. And then especially in the summer, sunbathe for at least 10 to 20 minutes per day. That might be enough for most people, especially if you're in a place with strong summer sun like Texas. If you're further north, you might need more. If you have dark skin, you'll need more. If you have lighter skin, you'll need less, because your skin is designed to absorb more light. Conversely, if you have light skin and you go and you're in the middle of the summer, you won't want to stay out as long because you'll burn and expose yourself to the risks of burning. And then in the evening time, you'd want to basically reverse the morning. You'd want to watch the sunset for at least 10 to 15 minutes or get some afternoon light. At least let your brain be aware of the light state. Like even if I'm indoors, like last night, I started watching a movie before the sunset because the sunset's here, like it gets dark at 9.
Right.
It's crazy. It's so late because of we're far west in the central time zone, I guess. And so the light comes up like late, like 6:30, relatively late, but it also goes down super late. Like it's dark by 8:30 or 9, and it's going to be later as June 21st comes around. So anyway, I was still aware that the sun was going down. Like I got some exposure, just letting my brain know. So I'm constantly aware of where the sun is. So that's morning sunlight, midday sun. So morning sun and evening sun set our body's rhythm more than anything, preparing us to wake up and then preparing us to wind down. Midday sun basically powers our cells and biology and creates vitamin D and all these things. So you kind of need it all. If you lived outdoors naturally and took your shirt off and you're working outside, you'd get more than enough sun. No sunglasses, no contacts, no eyeglasses ideally, because these disrupt the wavelengths of light reaching the eyes. And so, that's a prerequisite.
Can I ask you about sun gazing?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. I was at a gathering like a month ago. A group of us were outside on this ranch and we were just all talking and the sun was going down. And like 3 or 4 of us were just, it was that magic hour and we were just gazing directly into the sun, looking at it, staring at it. And somebody else came by and was like, "Are you guys looking at the sun? You shouldn't do that. You're going to burn your corneas." And somebody else responded, was like,
first, they're wrong. You'd burn your retina. And secondly,
Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because all of us were just like, this feels so right.
Yeah, it does feel so right. So
where's the balance there?
It's the last hour, depending on where you are, the last 30 to 60 minutes before sunset and the first 30 to 60 minutes after sunrise are generally safe to look into the sun. I say first 20 to 30 minutes as a general rule, because people if you start looking at the sun and observing the way it moves in the summer, or if you're closer to the equator or in the tropics, the sun rises and it goes up and overhead very fast. The further you go from the equator or the tropics, the more the sun rises horizontally and it lags all the way around the horizon. And that's what makes in the tropics, anywhere in the tropics, which is the 23rd and a half latitude north approximately and 23rd and a half latitude south, tropics of Cancer, tropic of Capricorn. We say tropical, like we think about palm trees and stuff, but it's actually like a astronomical or geographical line. And the tropics, if you believe that the Earth is a sphere, are based on the fact that that basically the Earth has a tilt. I love that
caveat.
Because some people don't, and also it is just information I've just accepted from scientists, and so I don't know if it's a sphere. Just saying. And people get super triggered. What? He's a flat earther? It's like no. I did not say that. It's just I had to realize that I'm all about not just parroting things you've just heard and at least trying to have some understanding of it. And it's that's one thing where it's I think more than likely the Earth is a sphere, but it's I want to get rid of this idea that you can't question things, even if they've been proven supposedly in the past. So many things are proven, could be wrong. It could be oblong. I don't know. Anyway, so assuming the Earth is a sphere and it has this tilt, and again, because of my model of the way I understand light and the sun, I'm much more inclined to believe it's a sphere because that's what I've based a lot of this information is based on. But anyway, so Earth is a sphere. It has a 23.5 degree tilt, meaning but I was wait, the Earth's just a sphere. How could it have a tilt? The tilt isn't innate in the Earth. It's because it's just a circle. How could a circle have a tilt? It has to be relative to something.
Right.
So the tilt is the difference in degrees from the Earth's rotational axis around the sun relative to its daily rotational axis. So the Earth's daily rotation around its own north, or its own axis from north to south, the central axis of the Earth, is 23.5 degrees off of the axis in which it revolves around the sun.
Right, its pole, right?
Yes, yeah, the pole, exactly. So the Earth's pole, so imagine if you had a rotisserie chicken, instead of rotating around a heat source straight up and down, it's kind of rotated. So at one point, the southern side of the chicken would be closer to the heat source. And then when it comes to the other side, the northern side would be leaning in more.
Right.
I hope people can visualize that.
Yeah.
And if you're watching, you could see my arm movement. So if the sun's here in the middle, the southern hemisphere, if this is south, is getting more sun now. But then here, the northern hemisphere is getting more sun.
Right.
And this is why the southern pole, the south pole here, would actually have 24 hours of darkness at the furthest extent of this tilt, of the distance. And then the northern hemisphere would have 24 hours of light. And then conversely, southern hemisphere would have 24 hours of light and northern hemisphere would have 24 hours of darkness for a certain period. Anyway, so that is with sun gazing. So the point is with this different places on Earth, the sun will go straight up really fast if you're inside the tropics, and it'll go right overhead almost every time of the year. And the days will almost always be about 12 hours, give or take, in the tropics. And the closer you get to the equator, it's 12 hours of night and day exactly all year, basically, yeah. And then if you go further north, you'll have less light in the winter, shorter days, but more length of light in the summer. The intensity of light is not the same everywhere on Earth, but the amount of hours of light is the same everywhere on Earth across the year, meaning it's just the distribution. So it's either 12, 12, 12 all year on the equator. At the North Pole, it's 0, 0, 0, 0, then 24, 24, 24, and it balances out.
Yeah, the mean, the average.
Yeah, in every location gets the same amount of hours of light every year. Because if you're getting 12 per day the whole year, you're getting 12 per day the whole year.
So there's more variance in some areas.
Exactly.
And less variance as the amount of hours per day.
Yes, exactly.
But over the total, the mean average of the year, it equals
out. It would be 12 hours times 365 days a year.
Right.
Basically, we'd have to count the hours. But That's pretty simple math. So anyhow, so the point is, if you're somewhere far north, the sun will not just rise straight up. And the higher up it goes, the more UV, which is what could burn your retina. So that's why I'm sharing all this detail, because if you're further north, like even Texas, but further north would be like Wisconsin or even Canada or somewhere in Europe or Norway, the sun will rise horizontally. So in theory, like I was in Norway, and the sun would literally graze the mountains across the distance on the horizon. So I could have sun gazed safely for 5 hours in Norway because the sun never came above a point where it has enough UV to be dangerous.
I see.
So that's why there's context. But when I was just in Costa Rica, the sun comes up so fast that after 20 minutes, it's so high that I wouldn't want to gaze at it. In fact, it's like, because I was on a Pacific coast, if it came up over the palm trees, by the time it came up over the trees on the beach, it would be so high that I wouldn't want to gaze on it in the morning at all, unless I got to the top of a hill and saw it on the horizon.
So as a general rule of thumb, closer to the horizon, safer to gaze.
15 to 20 minutes, correct. Yeah. And if you're really deep in the winter, maybe you could do up to like an hour. I wouldn't recommend more, 30, 40, 45 minutes. But if it's summer, I would do like 20 minutes to 30 minutes max.
Okay.
And these are not medical recommendations. Anyway, it's beneficial because it sets your body's rhythm. It charges up your brain, the nerves going from your eyes into your brain. It puts a lot of energy in there, and it makes everything work, both sunrise and sunset. So those are the core light parts of the light diet. Now, what I've realized from Ayurveda is they had the eating timing figured out really well. So according to Ayurveda, the best time to eat for the body is you want to have meals no closer than 3 hours apart to allow for adequate time to digest out of the stomach, at least 2 hours to get everything fully digested out of the stomach and small intestine into the large intestine, where it can take much longer before it's eliminated and the bacteria get at it at that point. And then you want to not drink any fluids 30 minutes before a meal because it dilutes the stomach acid, and 2 hours after a meal. And having done a very strict Ayurvedic regimen actually I'm more or less on it now, I can feel very deeply if I drink before a meal, it's much more prone to have gassiness or indigestion, or versus just not having fluid. So you'd want to drink up to 30 minutes before a meal. And so having 3 hours between meals and snacks and so on at least gives you time to digest and then have fluid. And then, so it's not like you should be drinking water constantly throughout the day. It should really be in these tight, more or less tight periods. Now, again, people say, oh, but primal, when you're in nature, when you get to the stream, you're just going to drink. Yeah, but we're not in nature anymore. Like, we don't want to go back. De-evolution is not the goal. Like, if we understand how the body works and we know we have access to food and water, then let's do what's biologically best. So breakfast, in general, again, according to Ayurveda, is best to be somewhere between 7 and 8 a.m. And most people, they don't wake up till then. So like most people, they're like, I'm not hungry for breakfast, but it's because they ate way too much food too late in the day. So they're sleeping in too late. If you wake up at the correct time, like between 4, 5, and 6, then by 7 or 8, you're definitely have time for breakfast.
And what do they recommend that you eat at that stage?
It depends completely on your what's it called, constitution. And so I wouldn't recommend now, but it shouldn't be heavy. It shouldn't be too heavy. It should be light no matter what, because you should first of all have a big appetite for the main meal of the day, which is lunch. And secondly, like if you're going to do some exercising in the morning, like you could eat your breakfast before and not be like stuffed, right? So wait 20 or 30 or 40 minutes and then like be ready to train. So like, something not super heavy, whatever that is for you. And so then lunch, apparently the time that the enzymes for heavy food start to be really strong, which is in accordance with the strength of the sun, which is another reason why I was like, oh, this is what I was looking for. It all makes perfect sense with the science I've come across in the West. They say it's between around 10:30 and onward. And so, because that's when the sun is starting to be the strongest. So that would be the time you'd eat like your heavier food. So like, whether if someone wants to eat meat, like Ayurveda doesn't generally advise meat consumption and that kind of stuff. Cause like full Ayurveda is like vegan because they believe that that's the best for spiritual growth and so on, and karma and so on. However, if someone's eating meat, the recommendation still from Ayurveda or like westernized Ayurveda would be eat it in the middle of the day because your digestive fire is by far the strongest. Like don't eat a big steak at night, especially. Or in the morning because your fire is not quite strong enough to burn through it. And you'll probably be sluggish and feel a little bit brain foggy, unless maybe you're like training super hardcore or something like that. But so then, because it's relatively speaking for everyone. So then that would be the time for lunch would be like between 10:30 or 11 up to like 12 or 12:30, but not much later. And then like in the afternoon, what I do personally, so I follow all this very accurately. If I wake up too late, like where I'm not hungry for breakfast by 8 a.m., I just won't eat breakfast and I'll have an earlier lunch like 10:30 or 11. And then like the other time would be, if someone's like coming from eating all the time, they might want to have like a snack around 2 in the afternoon and then like a dinner around 5. But what I do, because I don't even want to eat at 5 because I know I'm going to feel better and fall asleep and sleep more easily and sleep more deeply and wake up feeling more light. If I don't eat food late, I'll eat like between around 3 or 4, I'll have like my dinner.
Right.
And that's just it for the day.
Yeah.
My like snack, if I'm already had a huge lunch, then I'll either eat nothing or have a snack or be done. So that's like the light diet from a food perspective, like now in the sense of light, like lacking mass. Like you just don't need to eat that much food. And the other thing is you want to chew your food fully.
Yes.
So like I've again working with this doctor, it's like chewing like a big lunch should take like 20 minutes to eat. Like you're savoring the whole thing. Like 20 minutes, that's a lot. Like I used to eat my lunch in 5 minutes if I counted the time.
Well, you inhaled your lunch.
I would inhale my lunch, exactly.
Yeah, you wouldn't really taste anything.
At all.
Yeah.
It's so much more enjoyable to actually
it's pleasurable to actually sit and eat your food.
Yes. But you know, if you're in like a state of stress, it's actually the way you eat, I've learned, is like really reflection of like your whole life.
Yeah.
And
how you do one thing is how you do everything. You've heard that. And I also, you know, as a side note, when I led this men's program, The Conscious Man, I had one exercise and one lesson, and it was how you eat is how you fuck. Right? So this idea is like, if you're just mowing down, inhaling your food, like that, how do you enjoy the pleasure in life? Do you actually stop to smell the roses, enjoy the sunset, be with your lover, be in the presence of their body? So all of this is, I'm really glad that you're bringing this up.
Yeah, and according to Ayurveda, that's true. The tongue and the genitals are directly connected.
Yes.
They both require wetness to function.
Yes.
As another, like, I guess they're directly connected. And so my friend and doctor told me, like, if you can't control your eating, you also will have a hard time controlling like your sexual desire and sexual appetite and craving for women, or even ability to control sexual energy like in the act of lovemaking.
Insatiability, like can't get enough, can't get full, you know, eating, overeating, and then that overexertion or spilling or leakage of sexual energy as well.
Certainly. So that was most interesting. So not only does it matter the timing of the meal, it matters when you eat, how long you eat, and then of course, what you eat, and then the water thing we already discussed. But this is like a really good first principles of Ayurveda, which is, again, the light diet, or the light diet is largely Ayurveda in a modern context. So those would be the ways you get sun. Those would be the ways you eat. And then the big piece is like meditation in the morning, like choosing to be happy unconditionally, regardless of your circumstances.
Right.
So all of this, again, will be in the white paper that I'm putting together.
Yeah, I love how Dr. Joe Dispenza said to us, if you sit down to meditate and you get up in the same emotional state that you sat down in, and it wasn't one you wanted to be in, then you haven't meditated, right? Yeah. So he does not get up until he's entrained himself to a slightly higher vibratory, better feeling state.
Yeah. And that's something that I've also learned to work on. It's not easy, but you have to, it's usually like the point, it's interesting, but the very point where I'm like ready to stop, it's like, that is the exact point. And again, it sounds cliche, but it's like, that is the point that I had to overcome. Like, so you had to overcome that limit. So it's like, just when you're feeling like you had enough, I usually will go back for like another round, like close my eyes again, zone in, and just be like, what was I so serious about? Usually it's in the form of like, why was I worrying about that problem the whole time? Like I could just forget about it or whatever and just focus on that higher energy thing and then still deal with all the problems or whatever if I need to. A lot of the time in my business, again, my business being a perfect reflection of me in externally pretty much, once I've like come to a place of a higher vibration, a lot of the time, like I realize certain things that I was creating problems for like aren't even problems. You know, like there's just things we'll look to latch onto. Like, so for example, you see I have this beautiful laptop over here. I just bought like a new MacBook Pro. They're the newer ones. They're like, they kind of look like the old design. They have these SD card slots and everything. And they're like, there's a bigger one, a smaller one. I spent so much energy like thinking about, do I want the bigger one or the smaller one? And then like this one, interestingly, compared to the last Mac, has like 6 hours less battery life. I'm like, what? Like of wireless web? Because it's a much more powerful processor. It's designed for like video editors and stuff, not like people just on the internet all day, like me, emails and Zoom calls and stuff. And so I just spent so much energy like thinking, oh, like I love this computer. It's fast and the design and blah, blah, blah. But like, I also prefer battery life over everything else. And I made it like, I spent like multiple days where it was like a thread in my mind, like as if it was a big deal. And then like some point, especially being in Austin this weekend, I was like, why was I worrying about that? Like it just, you know, speaking out loud, you can see things. It's like, yes, there's a practical measure, like especially when I go to Europe and I'm traveling and living like my sort of semi-nomadic lifestyle for months, I'd like to have something that I know I can count on. So in one way, like a decision matters for me to make the right decision, but like to be able to go into it from a place of like, okay, from like an energy, like, right, the energy is like everything's all good. Like that's the energy going in. And then it's like, all right, well, in the context of everything's being all good, like if it's another thing is like surrendering to what is versus trying to force my way. Like my way would be that the new laptop, as it should be, because Steve Jobs would never have allowed a newer device to be like inferior, I think, in some way, in my opinion. Like it should be that the newer device is both better and has the same or better battery, right? But like I can't change that. So it's like I should just accept, well, if I want a longer battery life, then I should just, it would be, my only choice is to surrender and use the last generation.
My only choice.
I'll be careful. If I want to have 17 hours of wireless web browsing, the only option that I'm aware of at the moment, until they release maybe the next device, is this. And it's just something, it's like, you know, the serenity prayer, like God grant me the...
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking that.
It's like, that is what I have. I have two choices, or like a few choices in this context of a not big deal situation. And I'm really just telling something was on my mind like last week. And I can just say, you know what? I literally have like my, let's say, quote unquote, old computer. It's not like it's 5 years old. It's like the last literally one before. So it's like, I'm already so lucky. It's like, if I want a long battery life, I'll take that one. If I want the newer, faster one that I'm even more stoked about because I just got it, that might wear off, then I'll take the newer one. Even better, this is the best part, when I get to a higher frequency, I was like, well, wait, I'm traveling. Sometimes I'll be gone for 7 months. I'd like to have, it would be ideal for me to have a backup computer anyway, because I run a business online. And you know what's interesting? For those who travel, you'll learn in any Apple store in the world, if you use Macs, you cannot get an American keyboard in any foreign country because the countries only stock the local language's keyboard. And I would not want a keyboard with like weird characters for it because it just would mess up my flow. So it's like, you can always buy a new iPhone or iPad in any country because they're all the same. But the hardware keyboards you have to get in your native country, or you could get it in a foreign country, but you'd have to have them order it online. And then you'd have to wait 3 or 4 weeks in that place, which I don't usually do. So I'm just like, oh, that's like this is the best part. An even better situation presented itself from what I thought to be a challenge. Was like, wait, maybe there's a reason I now have these 2 laptops, because maybe I'm supposed to have both. And if I had to bet, I'll go on this trip, one of them, something will happen, and I'll be like, I'm so glad I don't have to wait and do all my work on my phone for a month while I wait for a new computer. And
you surrendered, like you said, to what is. You surrendered the melodrama that lay down, man. The thought. This is great. I love this. The thought room is meant to be a cozy place, so please get cozy. Surrendering to what is, to what's right here. And you brought up the serenity prayer, right? It's this idea to change the things that we can, and to accept the things that we cannot change, and
the wisdom
to know the difference.
Amen. Hallelujah.
The wisdom to know the difference. Is this something that I can change? And if it's not, I'm not going to spend my energy spiraling here. I'm going to let this go. Yeah.
I'd say that's a pretty good place maybe to start wrapping up, because that prayer is so beautiful. However, I realize we haven't talked much about raw optics, so I could give a brief.
Yeah, I have a couple questions for you, and I'd love to end with the piece about raw optics.
Rapid fire.
I have one question that is a little bit controversial, and you can give me a quick answer to this, but it feels relevant, which is sunscreen. Do you wear it?
I wear only something called Manda, Manda.
Oh, that's Cyrus.
I don't know them. I don't know them, but they're
Cyrus great. Sutton. He's been on this podcast.
Great.
He's a friend.
Well, tell him his product's great.
Yeah,
thanks,
the
Cyrus.
Ocean Safe, right?
Yeah, it's not just that, but it's like literally sunblock, meaning that it sits on your face and you have to wipe it off when you're done. So it's physical protection,
right?
Versus chemical protection would be like sunscreens that absorb into your skin, and then ultimately they contain already carcinogenic chemicals, which become more harmful when they're oxidized by the ultraviolet light of the sun,
right.
And then they absorb into your bloodstream. Mm-hmm. So this is like zinc, so it's a mineral that is absorbing the light,
yes,
and then it's absorbing / reflecting. and then it is not absorbed into your bloodstream. It's not damaged and it's not absorbed into the blood. That's why you have to literally wipe it off when you're done. When I surf, usually it comes off by the end of my session. It'll like slowly come off in the water, but it's mostly waterproof. It's great. I always have like 2 things of it when I go traveling for months because I love it. There's many brands that have kind of taken that idea. I don't know if they probably weren't the first, but they do a great job, and they have a mirror inside the cap, which is great.
Oh, so I love that.
So yeah, I use that. I wouldn't use any chemical-based sunscreens. The ones that if they rub in, but the thing is, people say, well, I don't want my face to look all white or my body to have like this white stuff all over it. Then you should just put on a shirt. So get enough sun. The best sunscreen is called melanin. It's this natural pigment that evolved for like 4 billion years in the body, and it absorbs and tunes down high energy ultraviolet light into infrared. It turns like a high energy light into a healing light for the cells. And that infrared light charges up our cells as well. So it turns high energy ultraviolet into very, very healing infrared light. And so it's actually the best sunscreen ever. It's like 99.99, I believe, % effective at doing that with ultraviolet light. And it's free and it's maximally effective. And if you wear sunglasses, you'll block the stimulus of UVB light to the brain through the eye. It tells the brain to make more melanocyte stimulating hormone, which tells the body to make more melanocytes, which make melanin. So by wearing sunglasses, you expose yourself to a greater risk
I didn't know that.
Of skin cancer and burns and so on. Like if you covered the eyes of a chameleon, it wouldn't be able to adapt to the colors of what's behind it or around it because their sensors are in their eyes for adjusting their colors.
So we're distorting it.
Yeah, so we're like chameleons with the light coming through our eye. We change our tone. And those who are very tapped in, like extremely, like this Ayurvedic doctor friend of mine, like he'll go out for a brief surf or sunbathing session and he will instantly become darker like a chameleon, like within minutes. His tan will actually change. And it's something like I've never seen before, but he's opened me up to what's possible on the deepest extents of the light diet, which is why I've become a big fan of this Ayurveda. So no sunscreen, no sunglasses in general, unless you're in really high light areas. Eventually, we'll probably make like a healthy sunglass. Like,
do you piss doctors off a lot when you say things like no sunscreen?
No, I don't think so, because I consider myself like a journalist, just sharing what I found and come across. And so like people who don't want to change, they're not going to change, or who don't want to consider other perspectives, they're firm in their ways. So I don't think so. I don't think I piss them off. I think that it's not like, what I'm talking about is fairly well known, but most of the people listening to what I share are like, they believe it already.
Right.
So it's not like there's a lot of controversy. I try not to create controversy. I'm not interested in like trying to sway people who are believing another way.
Right.
It's just for people who know that way is wrong because they've already experienced all the failures of Western medicine and they're looking for the answers. I just want to be able to help share my experience.
Love that. Perfect. Well, as we come to a close, there's a couple of things that I just wanted to mention about my life, and actually some of it's what you've taught me, because the first time that we met, we were actually at that hookah bar and you grabbed my phone and you changed all the settings on it so that now I have a shortcut. If I hit the side button 3 times, the whole screen goes red. And as I'm winding down for the day, one of my practices is turning my phone on airplane mode a couple of hours before I go to bed. And also I keep it off until well into my mornings, like 11 or noon, even after I've done my writing, my spiritual practices. And I intentionally wait to turn my phone on when I'm ready to receive the world versus externalizing my power by waking up first thing with notifications that pull me away from what my dharma is, what my mission is. So I get all of that in check first. And you adding this red light to my phone, I would love if you can talk about just really briefly why you did that. I know you've done that for a bunch of people. You do that to people. You just grab their phones. And then can you walk people through it right now who have their phones, if you can, or maybe there's a YouTube video.
I would say just go on YouTube and search how to make your iPhone red and with a shortcut, because it's a little too complicated to share verbally, but
it's in like the accessibility settings, basically. So you can YouTube this and you can figure out how to have a shortcut button so that you can at any whim turn on just like a red screen.
Yes.
It takes out all the blue light or a lot of it and drains the color from it. It's not overstimulating, won't mess with your your hormone levels, your circadian rhythm. It'll help you prepare yourself for sleep. So that's one thing I wanted to name for people to go seek out as a resource. And then, as you can see, Matt, you're sitting in my home right now. Really big proponent of natural light.
Yes.
I almost never turn on my lights.
It's great.
In my home ever, because I have a lot of natural light in it. And then in addition, every single room in my home has Himalayan salt lamps. Like even the bathroom light, I don't generally turn on because there's a soft glow of a Himalayan salt lamp at all times.
Great.
These are some of the things that I've done that I've learned over time that have really softened my transitions and really helped me improve my health and my rhythms. Are there anything else, little small sprinkles before we come to a close, that have really helped you, that regular people who might be overwhelmed by going straight into the light diet can do a couple of things right away?
Yeah. So first of all, windows actually are not that good. They're way better than like having bright LEDs and stuff, but they're not ideal because they filter out near infrared light and also other spectrums. So if we just had that door open, I should have probably done that in the beginning, open the door, but you might have the AC on in here because it's kind of hot outside. And then like these windows, in general, windows just aren't ideal. There's like, it's not sunlight
glass
anymore.
Is not ideal.
Glass specifically.
So like if you had a screen.
Yeah, screen, exactly. Screens would be better. And we're eventually, this is like longer term, but we're going to create much better versions of window glass to be used for windows as well. That will be part of RAW. So anyway, the best things, so that's why I created RAW Optics, the eyewear, because during the day, if you're in an office or school, you can wear our yellow daylight lenses to block excess amounts of harmful blue. Basically, when you have fluorescent and LED lights, it disrupts the body tremendously during the day, even though blue light is okay from the sun during the day.
Are these them?
Yeah, those would be the yellow daylight lenses.
I'm going to put them on.
Thank you.
And you can tell me how cool I look.
Yeah, great. So you'd wear these, if we had like fluorescent and LED lights above us, I would wear those now. Anyhow,
I
they're
feel
quite
very
nice.
Awake.
They definitely, yellow color can also like boost the mood. So they boost the mood, prevent eye strain, headaches, and fatigue during the day. But I wouldn't wear them outside except for like short bursts if you want to have a little fun boost. But it's really important to get the full spectrum of sun when you're outside. So I wouldn't wear them for extended periods outside. But I would if you're indoors all day. And I would go outside every hour for fresh air and sunlight if you're indoors working during the day, if you have to be, or just work outside in a covered area. Like you don't want to be in direct sun for too long. I don't recommend working in direct sun much at all in general, unless it's weak sun, because if it's intense sun, you want to be able to give your attention to it, just like a massage, and let it actually affect you, just like your food as well, eating. You don't want to just sunbathe and be like distracted, because I think it can also, just from my experience, it can be not ideal absorption of the sun. If your attention and energy is elsewhere, you want it to be able to be present on the sun. Yeah. Well, because the blood needs to come to the surface of your skin to be irradiated by the sun, and that's actually how you absorb the light. And if you're thinking too much, your blood's going to be in your brain. If you're just post a big meal, your blood's going to be in your gut. So you need your blood and your attention to be able to be on the sun.
Right.
So it's like if you're going to ask for the sun's blessing, you should bless the sun.
It's intention.
Yes.
It's like, again, if we're making love to someone, we're there. We're in that moment.
Correct.
We're present with them. We're absorbing and co-creating in the beauty of the experience. If we're eating, we're just with the food and with ourselves. And if we're with the sun, we're being with the sun.
Yeah, so that's big daylight lenses. And sunset lenses are the ultimate product. I would recommend if someone asks which do they start with sunset. But if you work indoors during the day, I would get both for sure. We have a discount if you buy, two of the same style.
I didn't want to take those yellow ones off, man. Yeah. Those are great.
The red sunset lenses you would use at night. The difference is the yellow daylight lenses block only all blue light, about 99% of blue light. And then which again, you don't want to block from the sun, but from artificial light sources is totally different. It's more stressful for the body. We just don't want it. Red sunset lenses block all blue light and about 95% of all the green light as well. And so that's because green is more high energy like blue, not nearly as much as effective on the circadian rhythm as blue. So you could even use the yellow ones at night, but green kind of gives you this extra punch, like an extra kick that makes you even more tired faster. They're darker, they make you more tired, and you sleep really well. When you wear them, you'll fall asleep more quickly, easily. You'll sleep more deeply. You'll wake up with more energy, similarly to how not eating a lot of food at night. You want to keep the light off your gut because food breaking down is just like light. You want to keep your gut like dark going into sleep, and you want your eyes to be dark as well, or at least absent from blue and green light. So you'd wear sunset lenses from the time the sun goes down, or at least 3 hours before sleep until you go to sleep. I like when the sun goes down because I keep my body's rhythm aligned with nature.
Yep.
And then that's basically, if you did everything we talked about today, it would really totally change your life.
Yeah.
Massively. And like people are like, how are you 22 and like doing all this stuff? And like I would attribute a majority of it to like my motivation, like innate, and 2, to like the improved overall cognitive and physiological function afforded to me by more sun and protection from harmful light sources.
Hell yeah. And you have been so gracious as to offer our listeners a discount, which is going to be the code ThoughtRoom. And we'll put this all in the show notes, ThoughtRoom, all one word. And the website for that is?
rawoptics.com. That's RAoptics.com.
And that coupon code will be for 15% off.
Yes.
Any Raw Optics products. Will that include also the course or whatever you had?
Yeah, actually, if someone wants it, it would also.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Of course. My pleasure.
This has been really, really fun. I'm so grateful to finally be here and to do this with you.
Likewise. I've enjoyed it too. This has been a great one.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
Take care.